Today, I'm going to show you the new array slash symmetry tools. That may sound boring, but you can do some really cool stuff with them. What about creating prefab groups and keyframing between them to create cool animations or whatever any of this is? These tools are exciting because it means you can spend a lot less time, anywhere from minutes to hours over an entire project, placing stuff all around your map one at a time, and more time making the fun stuff for making memes in the official Creator Front Discord. And let's be honest, would you rather place 100 torches in a perfect circle by hand or explore Shaznia or joke around and off topic in the Discord? Because I know my answer. Most importantly, you should really get your hands on this and try it out, because I assure you are going to get a lot of cool ideas once you start generating and seeing the things you can do. It's great for inspiration. For example, I was just playing around and accidentally made an eye shape and then decided to animate it. And I thought that was pretty cool for a weak point. First, let me show you the tools. If you right click an entity or a selection of them in the context menu, find the array and symmetry tools down here. For now, let's care about the grid array. Here we have a 1x1x1 cuboid, which is one of the new basic shapes added this update. Feel free to check on my asset and node update log in the description. Since our block is 1x1, let's set the gaps to 1 for perfect spacing. Since we know our block dimensions, let's set the gap between the objects it creates to 1. And we don't care about the y, and so we can leave that to 0, and we can set z to 1 as well. You'll understand this in a moment. Let's set this 2 and this 2, and hit this. You'll immediately see a 2x2 square is created. You should understand from this 2 in the x and 2 in the z. Does it make more sense now? We just defined a 2x2 grid, and the interval is just the gap on each axis that each object is offset that we are creating. And the count you put in here, so 2x2 or 4, the original object is included in that count. So we'll only ever create 3 here, and we'll have 4. If we want to, we can set these further apart by changing the interval. So we can change x and z to 2, and you'll see they get spaced out like this. Or what if we half that and go 0.5, 0.5? You should see the blocks appear inside of each other, as opposed to whenever they're a little bit bigger, they offset into this proper square. All right, let's show you the y-axis. So let's quickly one everything out, and let's create 5 by 5. So since our y interval is set to 1, it should just keep stacking the blocks 1 by 1. So let's add an array quantity of 1 to y. You'll see now we have 5 by 5 times 2. So 50 total here. If we increase this to 4, we'll be up to 100. And if we increase this to 5, oh, wait, see? So this is something that's very important to know. Your grid arrays and your ring arrays cannot exceed 100 items at a time. This is the same limitation as when you copy stuff. You can't copy more than 100 items at a time. But there are ways around this, such as decorations on an object. If you want to do like a really complicated model or something with decorations, and then copy that prefab, that also works. In reality, though, you can just do things in batches of 100 at a time, and I've never really ran into a limitation where this actually matters. It's just more something important to point out. Okay, now that you understand that this UI isn't scary, let's move on to something more practical and show you some cool things you can do with this. So I'm going to create a little village, and then I will explain to you some cool use cases. Kind of cute little village. Let's say we want to add some street lights going down here, equally spaced. Let's just put one here. Let's right click, go to grid arrays. We'll set this to 1 and 15. It'll be 15, every 15 Z, it'll place one. We don't want to mirror it over here because we're going to do a symmetry. And we'll do 5. Bring it down to 4. I think that's plenty for this little neighborhood. So let's hit confirm create. We're going to want to symmetrically mirror them. So we're going to go here. We're going to go to axis symmetry, and we're going to change x to 5. And that's pretty much the gap that it's going to offset, and then place these here. And we'll set this to 0 and hit preview. We could probably go like 5.5, maybe push it a little bit more. There you go. And hit confirm create. Look at that. Just like that, you placed 8 perfectly spaced street lamps and gave your little neighborhood cute little lighting. Did you know what? What if we wanted a cute little dirt road running down here? Now let's do a really fast grid array. Let's see how quick we can do this. I want a spacing about that. We'll go too wide and we'll mirror it. 13. That actually fits perfectly. Confirm that. And now let's do a axis symmetry. All right, and for axis symmetry, let's do we're gonna rotate this to change the pattern direction. We don't want it to, if this is 1, it's gonna shift it down 1 unit here. And we want it to go towards the right, so we'll do like negative 1.5. Actually, that's pretty spot on. We could probably nudge it just a tiny bit more, but go with this. And now that that's like that, you could leave it above the surface, or I actually kind of like to sink it a bit, so it's like it's kind of falling into the dirt a little bit. And then you can go through and just kind of break the pattern up. You can maybe delete a couple every now and then, maybe move some around a little bit, just do a little bit of movement just to break up the visuals for the eye, the player. Maybe shift some back a bit. And honestly, I feel like obviously this would extend to the fuller scene, but I feel like this already has added a lot to this little scene of the houses as the lights running down. And if you turn this environment scene to nighttime, it would just pop really well with these rocks catching the lights and the lights going down the houses. And yeah, this is the power symmetry, because otherwise you'd have to paste all these by hand and then mirror them by hand. And you can do this instead in pretty much seconds. Or how about this? Set this to 1 by 1, so we're making boxes. And we'll set this X by 10 by 10, hit preview, confirm create, and check it out. You have a perfect grid for working with pixels. So if you want to do your own custom pixel art, you do that. You can make a little pixel art of the characters, or carve away little bits of the scene, scale this down so it's more like voxel stuff. And you can make your own custom voxels out of this and pair them together, create them into prefab groups, and do anything you really wish with this, which is really handy for carving out. So you get the template going instead of, imagine trying to place these 1 by 1, for example. Or what if, for example, you want to make a chessboard and all you had to do is put 4 of the cubes together, or you can make a 2 by 2 automatically, grid array. And since we have 2 blocks here, we won't have spacing enough for 2 blocks, so we'll just keep this default. So that's 4 by 4, a preview, and bam, instant checkerboard. Or black and white marble tile assets for a bathroom or kitchen set. Now, if you want to know the real power of this, it's in the fact that these are unique instances of these objects. So if we take this lantern, for example, and we look at its components, you'll see we have a light source here. And if we can do component and node work and other custom stuff to this, and then if we hit grid array, we'll give it a spacing of like 4, and we'll go 4, 2, and check it out. We have unique custom components with their lighting effects on them, or you could have motion devices and stuff, and then you create prefab groups and then like spawn in and delete the prefab groups and like kind of animate these and do it way easier and faster than by hand, and all sorts of custom stuff. Think of puzzles, think of parkour levels where you have breakaway platforms. See my breakaway platform video. You could just generate these in a grid and then delete the ones you don't want, or use this to get the spacing, and then they will all already be the automatic drop away ones. So they're very powerful, and I hope that gives you a tiny glimpse into some of the really creative things you can do with these. All right, so for ring arrays, let's use the same cuboid. Let's go to array ring arrays, and let's use the default angle of 30 and set the quantity to 12 and hit preview. See how it creates a ring of 12 boxes and there's no radius option? That's because the radius is designed by this first box here, the array position field. That is how far the center pole sits from your object. And that distance is the radius. So if we put a 2 in the X and hit preview, you'll see the boxes now sit 2 meters away from that pole. And that makes a 2 meter circle. for example. And once you play around with it, it'll click and it'll make it easy. And if you add Z to it, see, you add a further Z, and it just is an offset for the pole when this creates a radius. As you can see, it's the distance between the source object and this, which starts it. Now, there are two important numbers that work here. One is the angle, and the other is the quantity. The angle is the degrees between copies, and you'll see this in the artwork I'm going to show you now. You can see the degree lines coming out between each box, and they're, for example, 60 degrees here. So if we were to go 60 here and do 6, and maybe do like 4 here, you'll see a 60-degree angle between each subsequent box. Back with the default settings, if we change angle to 120 and keep the quantity of 3, you'll see here that with a quantity of 3, you get 3 total blocks, including your source block. The other instances fill out the rest of the quantity. There's only some really simple math here if you wish. 360 divided how many you want, or quantity, equals your angle. So 360 divided by 8 is 45. So you'd want 45-degree angle, and you want 8 here, and you see that there. Or if you 360 divided by 12 would be 30, and you put 12 here. You see, and of course you don't have to close the ring. We just did 30 degrees here with 6 of them. You have an arc, and you can do all sorts of shapes. So for example, if you made like a really tight angle, say 2 degrees, and you set the quantity to like I don't know, 32, you can almost get like this kind of book flaying out effect. One thing to worry about with these is that you will get Z-fighting on some of these depending on how the models overlap. It really just depends on the geometry of what you're working on and how the copies overlap, and it can be fixed by just slightly nudging the Y values up and down, or Z or X, depending on where the Z fighting is, or depending on where the fighting is happening, the Z or X or Y fighting. And for a practical example, if we'd use our earlier rule, if we want 12 candles to make a circle, we'd go 360 divided by 12, which is 30. Put 12 here. And just like that, we have a ritual circle. Imagine if you had to place each one, move it, align it, rotate it, etc. And now you can just automatically form a ring. It's pretty nice. And obviously you can offset it too, so you can like distance them apart or make them overlap, etc. All right, now let's start to learn the array vector field, which is right here. Let's turn this into a ring first, which I hope you should know how to do by now, and then it will be easier to explain. As you can see, the boxes generate around the pole, and if we were to change the pole's vector to say 45 degrees and generate, you see the vector changes from being up and down to like that, which means the boxes are going to generate around it like that. See, they're at a 40, the pole's at a 45-degree angle, so it's generating them at that angle. So if we were to say do a more obvious 90 degrees, which would be directly to the right, you'll see they'll generate around in a circle like this. Well, yeah, it'd be further back because of the offset, but as you can see, going back to 0, which will be up and down, and then a 90 degree, which will be pointing to the right. You can see how it rotates with it. So if we were to rotate this, it'd just be like rotating all those boxes. So hopefully that is kind of more innate understanding of what this does here. Here's a really good example that every instance copies whatever angle your original has with the pole in the center. So if we were to generate 3 right now, they would all keep this angle. You see they all point towards the center. What if we were to reset it and set it back to 120 and do 3? What do you think they're going to do? Are they going to point towards the center? Or are they all going to point this direction? Well, no, but they are going to maintain this angle. You see, they're maintaining this kind of offset with this. So you see it's going like this. It's very equal. Even if we did 4, sorry, if we did like a 50 degrees, we did 4, you see the offset is being maintained throughout the shape. This is how you get some really cool organic shapes. This matters because imagine, for example, you wanted to make an entire seating Coliseum arena. you made just one section. Well, if you wanted everything to face towards the center of the arena, so for example, go around, you could just do, you could make it the angle face the direction you want the seats to face, and then every subsequent instance will still face that angle and maintain that angle, which is very helpful. This also opens it up to some really unique, weirdly organic shapes like I was talking about. So, for example, just with that same premise, if we just change this to 90 and change the vector, look at the weird shape you get. Can you imagine trying to do that by hand? It almost looks like a pencil shaving in a pencil sharpener. And you can do this with a lot of different shapes with all the unique dynamic unit models, static models, and then shove it on an empty object and then create some really cool shapes. As you can see, that is how I did the eye that I show off in the video, among other very neat things. One important clarification that can be confusing is that you might think that Y does nothing. That's actually not the case. Once you've already tipped the pole with an X or a Z, so let's set this to say 90, and then you set this to, well, first let's show you what it looks like with that. But then if you enter a Y, you'll see it subtly matters, and that's because it tips the pole in a different direction. And so it swings that, say, lying down pole around like a compass needle. And so your upright ring points in a different horizontal direction. An easy way to remember it is that X and Z are like basically the tilt of it, and Y is which way the tilt faces, if that makes sense. And you get this kind of cool fanning out. And this is why I really suggest just playing around with it, because this will make a lot more sense when you just slowly start tweaking it yourself and previewing and seeing how it works. So definitely get in the editor and try this out. Grid array is great for placing a lot of something at specific intervals and then using the symmetry tool on them to create some nice designs. But creatively, the ring array is my favorite. For example, with a tall rectangle, just by using a ring array and changing all these settings to 0 and setting the quantity to like 14, we can create what is basically kind of like an Ionic or Corinthian column pillar. And where else would you be able to get this in the game models? It's just one of many types of things you can make by doing a sweeping circle. So let's get more into this. Let's check out some cool random uses of the ring array. Let's set this to like 4, 12, and you can create custom bushes for maybe a garden you're working on or something. Or what about using these new wireframe cubes for a kind of 90s, early 2000s Matrix kind of cyberpunk-esque effects. So it kind of looks like the old green wireframe things. You can do all sorts of array axis vector things, like fanning out more. Let me change it from that. 42. Some crazy shapes. See the inside of that? Imagine having this, but with the angles constantly changing, and have like 3 or 4 frames of that and constantly loop through it for an attack and stuff. Like, that is a really sick visual, and it feels so out of the world because it's not connected to any Genshin assets. That I think things like this are just such a cool use case of this. This is a triangle with this X and Z vectors twisted. Like, I don't know. I'm obsessed with these shapes. I think they're so cool. This is why I think you should really get an editor and start messing around with this, because you can't get these really anywhere else in Genshin. And also, if you then use symmetry tools on these, which do not have the 100 cap that the grid and ring array does, you can do a lot of other really cool symmetrical work on them. Now, let me show you one final thing for the ring array, why I think it's particularly cool. And it kind of goes into what I was talking about before about components and prefabs. This is a sword prefab. This looks cool. We can agree this looks cool. Imagine this like on the back of a custom enemy walking around. Like, it looks sick, but you want to know what makes it extra cool? Takes it to a new step. Let's load into the game real quick. And this is why it's cool. This is done with a really simple script that just randomizes. So you can see I put a single one over here, is for example, that randomizes the spin of a sword. It uses a target rotation, and it just gets a 3D vector value. It could be negative 360 to 360. And look at this weird flame. It almost looks like it's alive. It looks like little tendrils reaching out. And imagine this like behind a horrifying giant boss monster, or just as decor in a horror level, or just anything. It doesn't have to be swords. It can be any object in the game. Just the amount of things you can do with motion devices and stuff with these cool forms, because it just looks so unnatural. Like, have you seen anything like this in Miliastra before? I highly doubt it. The point is that you should really get in, test, play around with these, mess around with the components and stuff with these, because there's so many combinations and cool effects you can do. Like the monster eye that I show, that for example could be like a weak point on a false heart or something, you know, kind of like a Zelda style or what have you, and things like this. This could actually be an attack that could fly, and the swords could randomly fly off and throw at you, because these are each literally just a prefab. These are just prefabs copied over. This is 100 swords just swirling around, and I personally think that's really cool. Case in point, you can't tell me this isn't cool. All I did was add some lights to it and change each sword's color. Okay, just a little bit left and we're done. The final tools are the simple symmetry tools. Make a single copy of each object for symmetry as you define it. This also means that there is no 100 object capped like the ring/grid arrays. Let's start with point symmetry. It has one setting, position. This value is how far the point sits from your object, similarly to arrays. So if we were to, zero this out, set X to 2, the copy will land 4 units away, which is double the distance of our X we set as 2. And that's because the object is going through the point here and out the same distance set out the other side. It's very handy, but don't expect it to do any flipping or mirroring or anything. It doesn't rotate. It just copies the faces exactly as you had them and puts it on the other side. Honestly, axis symmetry is basically the same as point symmetry, in that it does the same thing but with a 180-degree turn. The position works identically, so if we type 2, it will go 4 away because it goes past that and then same units. Whereas the same thing with a point one. See? And if we go back to axis and try that again. See? It pretty much is the mirror. So, and then you can choose the details here, how you want to do it. So for example, if we wanted to maybe turn it back, we could do this and it would flip upside down and point at this. I really suggest just playing around with it and seeing what it does. Just imagine the point symmetry mode, but just along an axis, and use these settings to modify it here. And it is honestly really simple. The best way to learn this is to get hands-on, so you get a really intuitive understanding. Knowing point symmetry makes plane symmetry a lot more easier as well. Just imagine the plane as the point, and you can already guess where the arrow is going to go, which is on the other side of the plane. And you see that there. And if we set the plane down to flat, you can probably already guess where the arrow is going to go. If this arrow's up here and this plane's here, then with the offsets and stuff we have, there's only one place we could go, which is here. It's just a kind of planar symmetry, so it is going to use this visual plane here to symmetrically copy the object. It is also important to note that there is this option down here, which I haven't mentioned yet, but if you ever want to not keep the original object and just generate the new symmetrical area, then you can just tick that off, and it will rid yourself of the old object. All right, I hope that was enough to convince you to check out these amazing tools, and please check out the description for my update log, and thank you for watching.